He said he only wanted to talk. But when pride, betrayal, and love collide, there are no conversations, only consequences. This is the story of what happens when a son fights to protect the woman who gave him life and loses himself instead. Welcome to today's case. He went to fight his mother's lover. He shot him 18 times. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed and ready, because this story doesn't end with a verdict. It ends with a confession that will challenge everything you believe about family, loyalty, and control. Stay until the end. They lived on a quiet block in Atlanta, the kind of place where the air hummed with cicadas and everyone's business floated through open windows. But inside the Carter house, silence had a different sound, heavy, private, and waiting. For 17 years, Marion Carter had built her world from struggle. She worked night shifts at a hospital, came home smelling of bleach and tired dreams, and still found a way to smile at her only son. Dante loved her fiercely. She was proof that love could survive exhaustion. But even the strongest hearts crave something more than survival. Marion met Caleb one rainy afternoon outside the clinic. Older, confident, with the kind of voice that made promises sound safe. He began showing up with flowers, small talk, and the kind of attention she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, she laughed again. Dante noticed. He noticed everything. At first, Caleb was polite, a handshake, a sir, a smile. But over time, that politeness turned to distance. Dante watched the way his mother's tones softened around Caleb, the way she apologized more, the way her joy suddenly required permission. He didn't hate the man, not yet. He just hated what his mother was becoming around him. The house began to change. A second toothbrush appeared by the sink. His cologne lingered in the hallway. Caleb's name started showing up on bills. At dinner, Marion's laughter felt rehearsed. Dante's eyes stayed on his plate. Neighbors said they often heard arguing. Two male voices clashing, one soft voice trying to calm the storm. By Christmas, laughter had become a memory. By spring, silence filled the rooms like smoke. At school, Dante went quiet. His friends stopped asking why. His teachers stopped expecting answers. But alone, at night, he scrolled through his mother's phone, then his own, saving screenshots, text threads, timestamps. He didn't tell anyone why. He just needed proof that what he was feeling was real. And as he gathered those quiet pieces, one photo, one message, one late-night call at a time, something inside him began to harden. The night of the gunfire was still months away. But in the shadows of that small house, the story had already chosen its ending. What he didn't know then was that every small suspicion, every late-night silence, every glance he avoided would soon have proof. Ugly, undeniable proof. By midsummer, Caleb had stopped pretending he was a guest. His boots lined the hallway. His cologne clung to every room, and his voice had become the background noise of the house. He told Marion what to buy, what to save, how to live. And she obeyed, gently, quietly, the way a woman does when she mistakes control for care. For 17 years, this house had been Marion and Dante's world. Now it felt borrowed, a space that no longer belonged to either of them. Each night, Dante moved through the rooms like a visitor in his own story. Sometimes he heard laughter behind the door, sometimes arguments. Once, he heard his mother crying, the kind of broken, muffled crying that doesn't stop even after the room goes silent. That sound followed him like a shadow. Then one night, after another argument about money, Caleb stormed out and forgot his phone on the counter. It buzzed once, then again, a short, sharp vibration that filled the still house like a whisper too loud. Dante stared at it. He told himself to leave it alone. He even stepped away. But curiosity isn't sudden. It builds slowly, like pressure under the skin. The lock screen glowed. 11:42 p.m. He picked it up. The code was simple: Caleb's birth year. The screen unlocked with a click that felt louder than it should have. At first, it was nothing. Jokes with friends, work messages, photos of food, news alerts, the harmless, ordinary clutter of someone's life. He almost laughed at how dull it all was. He almost put it down. Almost. Then, near the bottom of the gallery, his thumb caught a flicker, a folder he hadn't noticed before. It was named after his mother. He froze. For a moment, he just stared at the name, pulse quickening, thumb hovering. Then, without fully deciding, he opened it, and the world went cold. Inside were photos and videos, private ones, moments no one should have recorded, let alone shared. And beneath them, screenshots of bank transfers. Marian's name beside every transaction, money moving from her account into his. He scrolled further, breath shallow, eyes shaking. Messages between Caleb and a friend followed. She doesn't even know she's on camera. Got her wrapped around my finger. Easy money. He wanted to scream, but the sound never reached his throat. It stayed trapped somewhere between his teeth and his chest. He dropped the phone. The noise hit the counter hard, too loud for that quiet house. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. And then he heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel outside. Headlights swept across the curtains. Caleb. Dante grabbed the phone, wiped it with his sleeve, and set it back exactly as it had been. The door opened seconds later. Caleb stepped inside, muttering to himself, reeking of whiskey and arrogance. He snatched the phone off the counter without a glance, grumbled something about forgetting it, and walked down the hallway. Dante didn't move. He stood in the dark kitchen, breathing through his teeth, heart thudding in the silence left behind. He'd seen too much. That night changed him. He stopped speaking, stopped eating with them, stopped pretending. He began to watch instead, quiet, deliberate, patient. He memorized Caleb's routine, where he went, who he met, when he drank enough to forget himself. He didn't tell his mother what he'd found. He wanted proof, undeniable proof that would end it. But proof wasn't what he was gathering anymore. He was gathering anger, silent, heavy, and alive. He didn't know it yet. But that night, he didn't just find a secret. He found the fuse that would burn the rest of his life away. The night began like a held breath, too warm, too still, the kind of quiet that warned of something waiting to happen. The TV in the corner played to no one, washing blue light over the room. The refrigerator hummed. Every sound seemed louder than it should. Marian was working another overnight shift. Caleb was out drinking, same bar, same friends, same easy laugh that had filled the hidden videos on his phone. Dante sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the photo on his dresser. He'd looked at it 100 times, his mother's hand on his shoulder, both smiling. But now, the smile didn't look real. It looked practiced. It looked like a woman trying not to cry in front of her child. The images from that folder wouldn't leave his mind. The stolen money, the messages, the voice clips, all of it looping in his head like a sickness that refused to burn out. He opened the drawer for his wallet and froze. There, beneath old bills and receipts, was a printed photo. His mother again, smiling. He recognized the frame, the lighting, the angle. It was one of the same photos from that hidden folder. He didn't remember printing it. He didn't even know when it had been taken. That was the moment something shifted. He closed the drawer slowly, sat still for a long second, and listened to the house breathe. Then he stood, reached for his jacket, and opened the metal box beneath his bed. The gun was there, his father's. Small, black, heavier than memory should feel. He checked the magazine once, then slid it into his jacket pocket. He didn't take his phone. He didn't want anyone calling him. He didn't want to be found until it was over. He stepped outside. The air was thick, humid, restless. Streetlights buzzed overhead, bleeding yellow into the dark. He walked. 1 block, then 2, then 3. His shoes slapped the pavement like a slow heartbeat. In his mind, Caleb's voice played again and again. Easy money. She doesn't even know she's on camera. Easy money. Each step made the words louder, sharper, unbearable. By the time he reached Jefferson Avenue, they were all he could hear. The bar's neon sign blinked in the distance, red and broken. Music spilled through the half-open door, bass thudding, laughter spilling into the night. He waited across the street beneath a dead streetlight, hands buried in his jacket, watching. At 9:11 p.m., Caleb came out, phone in hand, smiling, still talking to someone, another woman, from the tone. He leaned against his car, half drunk, scrolling through messages. Dante crossed the street. Caleb. The man turned, startled for half a second, then relaxed into that familiar smirk. Boy, what are you doing here? I know what you've been doing, Dante said quietly. Caleb chuckled. You don't know a damn thing. He took a step closer, breath thick with alcohol. She begged me for it, he said. You should thank me. I gave her something to feel again. Dante's jaw locked. You stole from her. Caleb shrugged. I earned it. He turned toward his car, still laughing. That sound, low, careless, proud, was the last thing Dante remembered clearly. The first shot split the night. The second felt quieter. Then came the ringing, metallic, endless. Light flashed with every squeeze of the trigger, each one carving out the sound of his breath. Neighbors later said they thought it was fireworks, but there were 18 of them. When silence returned, the street looked the same, but it wasn't. Caleb lay by his car, the phone glowing beside him. Marion's name flashed across the screen. Dante stared at it, unable to move. He wanted to pick it up. He couldn't. He wanted to breathe. He couldn't. He looked down at his hands. They weren't shaking. They just didn't feel like his. He opened his mouth, but no words came, only air. A soundless exhale that meant nothing. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to rise, small at first, then louder, chasing the echoes. He looked once more at the phone, the name still flashing in pale light. Then he turned away. The gun clattered to the asphalt behind him. He walked toward the end of the street, toward the city's steady hum, leaving behind the phone, the man, and the noise. Somewhere behind him, the fuse he'd lit weeks ago finally reached its end. And in the quiet that followed, the city swallowed the fire whole. The sirens came long before anyone knew why. They split the night wide open, loud, certain, and too late to change anything. The first cruiser reached the lot at 9:23 p.m. Flashlights sliced through the dark as officers fanned out, voices low and steady. One of them stopped first, bending near the car. A phone lay on the ground beside a still hand, its cracked screen flashing the same name over and over again. Marion. An evidence technician began marking the asphalt in chalk, 18 small circles glowing white under the lights. Each one told a story louder than words. Across town, in the quiet hum of the hospital ward, Marion Carter was finishing her shift. The machines breathed softly. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and fatigue. When the phone rang at the nurse's desk, she didn't notice at first. But then a voice asked for her by name. Ma'am, there's been an incident involving your son. Her body went still. The pen in her hand slipped. They didn't say more over the phone, only that she needed to come to Jefferson Avenue. By the time she arrived, red and blue light washed over the street like broken glass. Neighbors huddled together, whispering. Yellow tape fluttered across the parking lot, snapping in the warm wind. Marion ducked under it, her heart beating like something she couldn't catch up to. A young officer stepped forward, hand outstretched, eyes uncertain. Then she saw the sheet. For one wild second, she wanted to believe it wasn't Caleb, that it was someone else, that her life wasn't about to collapse in two directions at once. Then she saw the shoes. Hope died quietly. "Where's my son?" she asked. The officer hesitated. "We believe he's still nearby, ma'am." 2 blocks away, Dante sat on a curb beneath the underpass. His elbows rested on his knees, his hands open and still. He stared at his palms as if the answers might be written there. When the red and blue glow finally reached him, the world went muffled. The sirens disappeared, replaced by the hollow thud of his heartbeat. When the officers approached, he didn't move. He stood slowly, eyes empty, and spoke so softly they almost missed it. He heard her. That was all. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just turned around and let them take him. The cuffs clicked around his wrists like punctuation on a sentence already finished. At the station, the room was cold, sterile, the hum of the air conditioner steady, a drip from the coffee machine echoing against metal counters. Dante sat at the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. He took from her, he said. He filmed her. He made her cry. The detectives exchanged looks. When they asked why he hadn't gone to the police, he blinked once and said, "Because she loved him. She wouldn't have believed me." The detective didn't respond. He just wrote it down. Outside the room, another officer watched through the glass, his face unreadable. The evidence was airtight. The weapon, fingerprints, camera footage from a nearby store. It wasn't mystery that filled the air now. It was fatigue. Marion sat alone in a waiting chair near the end of the hallway. The fluorescent light hummed above her head. Her hands were clasped so tightly her fingers had gone pale. She hadn't cried. Not yet. When they finally let her see him, it was through a pane of thick glass. He looked smaller, his face pale, his eyes distant. When he finally looked up, their gazes met. 2 lives that had survived the same fire, neither left whole. She lifted her hand toward him. He lifted his halfway, then stopped, his cuffs glinting in the light. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. Her breath caught, but no tears came. Just a sound, soft, broken, more exhale than sob. By morning, the headlines had found the story. Atlanta man shot 18 times by woman's son. Commentators called it rage. Neighbors called it tragedy. But inside that house, now empty and stripped of color, it was neither. It was silence. Days later, detectives returned Marion's phone after the investigation closed. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through messages she had never seen. The same ones her son had read first. The folder, the transfers, the words that broke him. She pressed her palm to the table, trembling. For a moment, she didn't know whether to hate him for what he'd done, or herself for not seeing what he'd seen. Months passed. The courtroom was quiet on sentencing day. Dante stood before the judge, his head lowered, hands bound. When the words 25 years to life left the judge's mouth, Marion flinched, not at the punishment, but at how calmly her son accepted it. He nodded once, as if agreeing to something inevitable. She visited him every week. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they just sat in silence, the glass between them thick and cold. On the way out each time, she passed the bulletin board by the exit, a collage of families, prayers, and folded letters. One afternoon, she added a small photo of her own, her and Dante, before everything changed. Below it, she wrote 4 words. "We both survived, broken." The trial was never about guilt. It was about understanding what happens when truth becomes heavier than justice. By the time the verdict came, the courtroom had thinned. Reporters had moved on, cameras packed away, the story already old to the world outside. Only a few faces stayed: family, silence, and memory. Dante sat beside his attorney, hands folded on the table, breathing evenly. When the gavel struck, his breath fogged the air once, then stopped. For a moment, it was the only sound in the room. Across the aisle, Marion exhaled too. Not relief, not grief, just release, the kind that hurts and heals in the same motion. The world didn't linger. New headlines came, louder, easier to forget. But for Marion, time folded back on itself. Days replayed, nights stretched long. She returned to the hospital, but every beep, every cry, every patient's breath carried too much weight. Her co-workers spoke softly around her now. They didn't mean to sound careful, but they did. And she hated that kindness could feel like a cage. At home, everything stayed where he left it. His shoes by the door, his notebooks on the desk. Sometimes she stood in his doorway and thought she heard him upstairs, then remembered she lived alone. Sometimes she dreamed she heard the shots again, softer now, like a heartbeat counting down through sleep. In prison, Dante's world became repetition. Mornings began with a bell that no one cared to hear. The same footsteps, the same faces, the same silence. Every day, a single beam of sunlight crept across the wall of his cell, slow, exact, merciless. That's how he measured time. He didn't speak much. He didn't fight. He wrote letters he never sent. A chaplain asked once if he believed in forgiveness. Dante looked at the light crawling across the concrete and said, "Forgiveness is for people who still believe in tomorrow." The chaplain didn't ask again. When Marion finally visited, she looked older, not from years, but from carrying too many that had already passed. They sat across from each other through the glass. "I saw the folder," she said. He looked up, eyes hollow but calm. "You shouldn't have." "I had to. I needed to know." He nodded. "You were right about him." "You were right too," she said. "But I wish you weren't." A silence stretched between them, thick and full of things they'd both stopped saying. "I killed him, Mom." "You stopped him," she answered too quickly, and they both heard the lie in her voice. For the first time, their eyes met without shame. They both understood that truth doesn't heal. It simply removes the illusion of peace. The world moved on. The bar shut down. The parking lot was repaved. The scar on the asphalt faded under new paint, but not entirely. Some stains never disappear. Every Sunday, Marion went to church. She sat in the back pew, far from the choir. She didn't pray for miracles anymore. She prayed for quiet. After service, she lit 3 candles. One for the man she'd loved, one for the son she'd lost, and one for the woman she was still trying to forgive. She never said which was which. In his cell, Dante watched that same morning light crawl across the wall, a little shorter each winter, a little longer each spring. He wrote letters no one would read. In one of them, he said, "I don't hate him anymore. I hate the silence he left behind. I hate what it did to her. And I hate that love can turn into something people survive instead of something they live for." He folded the page, slid it beneath the mattress, and closed his eyes. Years later, a letter reached Marion. No return address, just a correctional seal. Inside was one line in his handwriting. "I'm still surviving, Mom. I hope you are too." She sat by the window, sunlight spreading across her hands. Outside, children were laughing, the kind of sound her home hadn't heard in years. She smiled faintly and whispered, "We both are." The words drifted out through the open window, carried away by the wind, into a world that forgets names but never forgets silence. Sometimes, violence doesn't come from hate. It comes from love that's been twisted too far, from loyalty that turns to shame, from silence that goes on too long. Dante didn't plan to become a killer. He planned to protect the only person who'd ever protected him. But in trying to save her, he lost everything: his freedom, her peace, their story. 18 bullets didn't just end a life that night. They ended the illusion that truth alone could fix what love had already broken. Today, the parking lot is just pavement again. The bar is gone. The city has forgotten. But somewhere, a mother still visits a son. And somewhere, that son still measures time by light moving across a wall. Some stories don't end in courtrooms. They end in silence, the kind that echoes long after the world stops listening.